are so grateful to Morton for their sponsorship of this podcast since day one. When I was an athlete, it was hard to find a carbohydrate drink that would give you anywhere near the fuel you needed for a long run or in a palatable format. And when it came to using bicarb, it was hard to find a trusted source, let alone one that provided a user-friendly pre-mixed product like Morton do with their bicarb system. And most importantly for race day, a bicarb product that doesn't cause stomach issues. I can only dream of such luxury. To find out more about the bicarb system, listen back to our interview with Andy Sparks in July. And to see how gels and drink mixes can benefit your road training, head to morton.com. And listeners can make the most of a one-time 15% discount code by entering Podium15 at checkout until the end of 2025.
Hamish, thank you so much for joining us. Loving the wallpaper background. Where do we find you today? It's kind of green and garish.
Yeah, in the forests of Germany. I'm in Heilbronn at the moment. I've got a competition coming up, just a street meet. So yeah, it's super looking forward to it. But yeah, the hotel is very kind of foresty and quite sort of like how do you say it? Like it's kind of like a brewery as well, and so it's got that quite industrial look to it, which is quite nice. But yeah, it's definitely worse places to be.
You're having to avoid temptation then, Hamish, at the moment.
Yeah, well, apparently they told me yesterday that their one of their key kind of exports in this area is wine, which I said probably didn't really tie into the high jump community too strongly, unfortunately. But I'm sure we can get some for the end of the season and enjoy it there.
It's quite high quality competition, this one, isn't it, in Germany? There's quite a lot of you guys.
Yeah, well, it's funny. We were actually looking at the start list yesterday and kind of talking about it with the meet organisers, and I think this will be the first time. Well, it's definitely the first time that me, Barsham, and Tamberi have competed since the Olympics. So 3 Olympic champions in one competition, and I'd be surprised if there was many high jump competitions in history that have had that many, past or current Olympic champions. So yeah, high quality, but that's what we love at this time of season, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So you're on your European stint at the moment, aren't you?
Eurosummer.
So it's So how long are you
chasing the sun
here for? And I guess for a lot of athletes from your neck of the woods, your side of the world, that is just part and parcel of having to come over and do this sort of thing. But I think for us, it is quite a strange concept that you'd be away that long from home.
Yeah, it's quite unique. I'll give it that. You talk to all the European athletes and, they can't quite believe how many hours it actually takes to get here. And once you kind of explain that to them, they realize why you don't go home, between meets. It was probably a question I got quite often when I was starting my career was, did you go home? 5 days between meet. Oh, did you go home? No, I didn't go home. But I suppose for me, I obviously kind of come over here start of May, and then we'll usually be here for the bulk of the summer, with maybe 1 or 2 trips if I'm lucky back home, just to kind of sort of just pick up a few things if I ever need to do things back home. So yeah, this year I got here just after Doha Diamond League. And then I went home for 3 weeks, just because I was actually moving house. So I had to go home, move the house, and then come back over. And I've been here for about a month now, and then we'll be here until the end of Tokyo. But I mean, I love it. I think it's amazing. I think that a lot of people my age are looking to try and do OEs and get overseas and enjoy the rest of the world. At this time anyway. And so I'm just lucky that I can do it for 5 to 6 months every year, and also do it as a job. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
I used to have some competitors, some friends in the States, that would do these long trips, and they just they'd give away their whole suitcase at the end of the trip. They'd be like, I'm so bored of all these clothes I've been wearing for months. Honestly, they'd stay in Airbnbs or whatever and then just leave it.
Yeah. We get pretty good at packing, and it's also quite weird when you go home and suddenly you have 10 options for t-shirts, or it's just no, this can't be right. But yeah, you definitely.
Do you just still pick the same one? Are you still going for your white shirt?
Yeah, I've got obviously, being a Puma athlete, I've got quite a few options for t-shirts, but a lot of them just sort of sit in the box until I'm ready to kind of get it out because I've worn out the last one. But it's definitely a weird life going from being so kind of I suppose, yeah, living out of a suitcase for 6 months and then going home and not living out of a suitcase. You get real itchy when you get home. You're like, when's my next flight? Like, what's going on? This isn't right. So yeah, it's very
You're
weird.
like, I do own unbranded clothes. This is absolutely crazy. And you also get to see Europe as well and explore it and tick off some bucket list things. I saw you on your Instagram. Obviously, you got to go and watch the Tour de France.
Yes. Yeah. So I think like probably in the first couple of years of my career, we did comp hop a lot. Like it was very much like, when's the next comp? Where's that going to be? Can we kind of get in there and do a bit of training? And we didn't really have a home. And that was quite hard. It was quite hard to feel like you had a routine and to really kind of get to know a place and feel connected. Because I think that's the great thing about being home, right? Is that you have your routine and you have your connection to your favorite coffee shop and your favorite restaurant and all these kind of little things that we sort of take for granted a lot of the time. And so, yeah, we definitely didn't have that the first few years, but pretty much since last year, we really identified that it would be nice to kind of find somewhere in Europe that we found that homeliness and that feeling of you get there and you can actually unpack your suitcase and kind of leave it there for a bit. And so, yeah, so the last, a little bit last year and then a lot more this year, we've actually been going to Nice. In the South France, and that's sort of become somewhere that we want to spend more and more time actually just training and living. And it does open up the opportunity to kind of do a few more things. And so, as you said, yeah, I went to the Tour de France this year with a friend in Nice, and it's yeah, I'm a massive cycling fan. Like, yeah, I'm pretty much at home. That's probably the one good thing about not being home a lot is because I spend far too much time on my bike. And my coach just gets real pissed off because you're trying to do all this power event stuff, and then you're turning into an enduro athlete. So yeah, to be able to go and watch that this year and actually support one of the boys who's a Kiwi who I know quite well, and his first Tour de France was real special. So yeah, I'm already like lining up everyone to already go next year and get amongst it as well. So yeah, it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool to be able to do that because I think from New Zealand, we see a lot of these sports events, but we don't really ever see them as kind of participants or as something that we'll ever experience. It's more just get up in the middle of the night, watch it on TV, try and stay awake, and then go to sleep again and get amongst your days. So to be able to actually get over here and actually live it is very, very cool.
Are you any decent at cycling,
No.
Hamish?
It's pretty much sort of sums up a lot of my sporting career, other than probably high jump. I love being outdoors. I love getting amongst everything that sport has to offer. I love golfing. I love cycling particularly, and both of those things. I love the fact that I don't have to be good at them. I go out there and I just feel like a normal person. I meet people and they're kind of like, oh, so what do you do? Oh, you're an elite athlete. Oh, okay, that's interesting. So it's sort of
wouldn't have known.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, I just passed you going up the hill and you were puffing. But no, it is very cool, and it's something that I think once I finish my career, I'll do a lot more of. But for now,
How's your French as well, Hamish?
It's not great. I'm not even going to attempt to sort of put anything in there, but yeah, it's getting better. And it's something that I think I'm going to try and sort of lean into a wee bit more in the next few years.
I'm surprised. Sorry, I was just going to say, being from New Zealand and the height you are, that they didn't manage to recruit you into something like rowing, because that's. I cover a lot of rowing. It's massive over there.
Yeah, rowing was probably the strongest thing. But I think the thing is like you also have to like look at who I was and what I was like growing up, and I wouldn't say that my attitude towards my training was probably the best, and so I think that kind of put off a lot of the sports coaches. They saw the height, and the rowing coach saw what I was like, and went, oh yeah, could be talented, but I just don't think we'd get him to go to training, and it's probably not great. So I think it probably put them off a wee bit.
And that's key in rowing, isn't it? You got to put the hours in.
All you do is turn up at 5 a.m. and you become a champion, right?
But not your jam, yeah. But so you've got this training base in Nice. I mean, I think that's a pretty awesome corner of the world to choose. Who's there then? Who have you managed to persuade to go to Nice?
Yeah, so this year it's been, my coach has obviously been with me, so Jane Sandilands, and my girlfriend has been there quite a bit. She's an up and coming heptathlete, so it's been really cool. She did GOTS and then World Uni Games, and so it kind of started out. I was going to go there. I was going to bring my coach, and my strength and conditioning coach, and my physio at sort of different times. And then what we're trying to do is essentially say like, look, we're going to be there from May to September every year. try and almost convince more and more Kiwis to kind of join us, because there are a lot of Kiwis in Europe, but they all kind of dot themselves around different places. And so if we can kind of build that environment, then I think it's going to be really good. But yeah, for now, it's just been those key people. But also, now we're starting to know the people at the athletics club, and we know, some people within the federation. And so it just means it's more consistent people. So yeah, it's super nice to have that that tight knit group, and hopefully we can grow from there.
Could you get some Aussies involved as well, or as in Aussie free zone?
Yeah, not pushing for Aussies, but if they're wanting to come, that would be great.
We'll accept them, maybe. So can we talk about your season so far then, Hamish? Because obviously 2024, what a year for you, becoming Olympic champion, dreams being made. Then you come into this year, we've got a world champs coming up. We had the world indoors as well. But I saw this quote from you that I thought was quite interesting, talking about height being the priority this season over results.
Yeah, that's probably more so next year. I think,
Okay.
yeah, it's always an interesting one, right? Like, I think last year I had a very clear goal. It was obviously to medal at the Olympics. I achieved that quite nicely, and I think that I put a lot of energy into that. I was very single-minded. I was pretty much just getting up, going to training, absolutely destroying myself in training, to a point where I knew that if I didn't go home and just fully focus on recovery, then I wouldn't be ready for the next session. And that was just my life for 6 to 8 months, and it worked. That was really effective, but it was also quite exhausting. And so I think that we sat down as a team, me, my coach, and the rest of the wider support team, and we kind of looked at what's coming up over the next 4-year cycle, and pretty quickly identified that doing the Olympic record and defending my title in LA was kind of the big goal. But also that's 4 years away. And so between now and then, you break down the steps that are required to get to that point. And this year was sort of more around just kind of contending with who I am now as a person, as an athlete, and just sort of seeing how things have changed since last year. What habits and routines have I brought on board last year that will continue to stick, and what kind of, what things have I learned about myself and about my, as a person, as an athlete, over the sort of last 12 months. So yeah, I think that's kind of where we're at this year, is just kind of settling and sitting with that stuff, and realizing that, last year was exhausting, and the next 3 years are going to be exhausting, as we kind of get closer to that time. And so it's just about enjoying it this year, and just seeing what I like about traveling and being on tour and competing. And I think that, yeah, I think the results have not quite been where I want them to be. And I think that probably one of my big kind of reflections is how much I do enjoy jumping well, and how much I hate, the slightly less than ideal results. And so I think that's a really good place to kind of be and reflect on. So yeah, I think also reflecting on the fact that, last year we were pretty much done with the season this time last year, and this year we've obviously got another kind of 6 weeks to go. So yeah, it was just around using that opportunity to use those early high level competitions as something other than kind of a real strict performance measure. Because if you're if you're trying to push really hard right at the start of the season, for me particularly, I know that I'll run out of legs by the end. So trying to just keep a little bit of powder dry until later on. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this next comp block goes, because that excuse kind of runs out pretty quickly when you've only got 6 weeks left of the year. So yeah, we'll see. I think it's been really cool. And then I think, going back to the original question, jumping Olympic record in LA is 240. And so,
Yeah.
In order to do that, we have to jump 240. And I have to work out how I can, increase my physical capability and my technical ability and all these things that kind of go into that. So pretty much from next year onwards, we step away from focusing on enjoying competition and seeing what I like about the space, and actually just try and jump high. So yeah, it's going to look quite a lot different next year in terms of my competition season, my schedule, how much I am actually competing. But I think that's all, it's all with that kind of LA kind of hat on, ready to go.
I think it's a really interesting insight there into people say that athletes think in Olympic cycles, but to have that insight into how you really are thinking in an Olympic cycle. And your generation, you're coming up on the 5th consecutive major championships. Like it's just been relentless.
Yep.
So you almost have to take this break. What do you think you would have the same attitude if you'd not won in Paris? Do you think you'd be giving yourself this year to relax before building again, or do you think you'd be chasing that 5th consecutive year?
That's a good question. I think the way that I challenged myself last year was the exhausting part. I think that the way that I stepped up from being a kind of journeyman athlete who kind of pulled the odd third, second, when everyone else wasn't jumping so well, and was kind of sitting around 5th to 6th in most comps. I think it was very much a case of wanting to step up and actually be a competitor. And so getting to the Olympics, I had done all that. And so I think, I mean, definitely deep down there would have been a sense of wanting more if I hadn't won. But at the same time, I think that it was all the work that we did before the Olympics, which was actually the really hard part about last year. And that was what was quite interesting. Was I felt like almost once I got to the Olympics, all the work had been done. It was kind of just a case of just holding my nerve and actually putting it out there. So yeah, I think I would have still been pretty cooked if I hadn't won. But yeah, it is interesting as well, because I mean that's kind of what we're contending with now. Is you've got athletes who exceeded expectations last year, and you've got athletes who probably didn't quite meet their expectations, and it's this unique kind of situation of being still a major championships year. Who's going for that big title, but also where does last year sit within that? And I think it's really different for everybody.
Your attitude towards this year then, Hamish, is quite interesting, because if you look at your CV, the outdoor world medal is the missing piece,
yes,
right?
It is.
So you could see how you could how that could have been a continuation, right, next one is that, but your mindset is quite refreshing from what it sounds like to me, because you're sort of taking the pressure off you, because in theory, Olympic champion, you're there to be shot at. There'd be more pressure on you, and you'd be wanting. You are absolutely world medal is my goal. But although it is, I know, Hamish, it doesn't feel like it's all getting to you, and you're not. It feels like maybe a weight's lifted off of your shoulders a little bit from that Olympic gold.
Yeah, I think so. I think, like you said, I can look at that CV, and there's a big glaring hole there. But I don't know. At the same time, like I think what I really love is when I'm confident in my jumping, and when I'm competing at a level that I'm proud of, and I know that that's going to come. And also, I suppose the fact that we have another world champs before the next Olympics probably helps me out a wee bit with that. And it's not that a world champs is devalued or anything. It's just the realities of where I'm at and kind of what I'm capable of doing right now. So yeah, I would love to win, but at the same time, I just know that the ultimate goal, and how it felt last year actually getting that Olympic title, for me, I think that there's an opportunity to use the next world champs as a real springboard, and this one is just about going there and like I said, just enjoying it and trying to make the most of that amazing opportunity.
Can we go back to the Olympics then in Paris? Because I feel like we've talked about a couple of hypothetical situations here where you're not the Olympic champion, and don't worry, like we're not trying to take the gold medal away from you. But there also was a situation where in qualifying it looked like potentially that wasn't going to happen. So can we go back to those moments for you where you're taking that third attempt? Was it at 2:20, I think? You remember it well.
I was trying to take the gold medal away from me.
But qualifying must be one of the weirdest experiences to go through as an athlete, because you know what you're capable of. You are training for a bigger day 2 days ahead, and yet that day may never come if you don't put everything on this focus that's happening right now that is within your capabilities.
Yeah, I hate qualifying. It's like the worst thing ever. I suppose for me, like it's quite a unique situation. I've never really had to do qualifying rounds when I was younger. In New Zealand, we just don't have enough athletes to need to do it. Even at an Oceania level or in Australia, we just don't do them. And so I pretty much have one comp every year where I need to do a qualifying round, and that is the major. And I think, yeah, there was definitely a lot of PTSD last year around qualifying rounds because I actually, not only have I never won a world champs, I've actually never made a final at a world champs. And that is in doing three world champs. I've kind of always fallen over in that qualifying round, and so I think going into last year, I knew that I'd done everything technically and physically to kind of get myself in that position, but those qualifying rounds are just it's just a completely different mental game than what I'm used to. I'm used to being out there until there's one guy left. But in those qualifying rounds, you're there until there's 12 guys left. And so on paper, it seems like a very easy kind of situation when you're used to winning. And yet you get out there and just the pace and I suppose just the way that you have to hold your nerve is just completely different. I suppose one of the big things is as a high jumper is that those qualifying rounds often take 3 to 4 hours, and you might only be doing 5 or 6 jumps, and they're not high jumps, any stretch of the imagination, but it's just the almost the ability to be as atrocious as possible. You have to be there, you have to just be present, and you have to just nail every attempt. And you can't really get in your head that you're waiting to see what everyone else is doing, because I think that's really the risk is looking at what's happening, and trying to kind of work out how many guys are left and all these other things. It's about just really staying to yourself. And I think last year particularly, I didn't really rely on all the mental cues that I had in my toolbox up until that 220. I was very much there to get out as quickly as possible. It was very much like, let's just get this done and then think about the next day and about recovery. And there wasn't really enough emphasis from me personally to actually go, we have to take this seriously and we have to really look at this as an opportunity to jump as high as possible. And so, yeah, in that 220, it was very scary. I mean, I feel like that was probably it was definitely the hardest moment of my athletic career, and potentially in my life so far. It was that kind of feeling of you put everything down and you know that you're in the best form of your life. You've done everything right, and yet here you are facing a third attempt at a height that you can clear in training every time. And it's scary because it kind of challenges your very being. You're sitting there kind of thinking like, maybe I'm just not a competitor. Maybe when the real kind of challenge gets laid down, there's just something in me that just won't rise to that. And that's a pretty scary thing to confront yourself with when you're at the biggest stage of your life, right? Like it's weird. And I think probably, on the flip side of that is then me personally, I relied on my mental cues. I relied on my breath work and my mindfulness, and I trusted my coach and ultimately got through that. And I look at that moment now as before it was the hardest moment and the scariest moment of my life, but then after it, I actually realized that was the moment I won the Olympics, because that was the moment I had to go to the absolute depths of my being and drag something out, and I was able to do it. And so you look at that moment and every other kind of tough moment in that comp afterwards. I had another third attempt in the final at about 2:31, and then obviously the jump off as well. It kind of pales in comparison to that 220, because you look at it and you just go, I've been here before. Like, I know what to do. I know that if I trust my process, I trust my coach, then anything's possible. So yeah, very scary. Wouldn't want to do it again. But in that moment, I think that was definitely the moment there that I knew that I was ready for the challenge and ready to go.
I think you said it right, Katie. Like, qualifying it's just such a weird moment. And I'm wondering, Hamish, listening to you talk there, it's almost do you feel like you disrespected the qualifying? And do you feel like that was almost like because you don't like it and it's uncomfortable, you come into 2024 in your shape of your life. Do you were like, oh, I'm going to master it because I'm a better athlete, rather than sort of really going through it before you got there?
Yeah, I don't want to use the word disrespected. Like I think that I was aware of how hard the qualifying was going to be based on my years prior, but I think I too much relied on my form going in rather than the things that enabled that form. It was more about, oh, I've been the best guy this year, and so therefore there's no way I won't be in the top 12, rather than thinking, what are the things that have got me into the being the best guy this year, and therefore what can I use to really push me forward. So yeah, it was just around being present and using that moment, because the thing is at the Olympics, like, and at any major really, it doesn't really matter who is world number one. It doesn't matter who's got the best jump that year. It doesn't matter what the form sheet is looking like going in. It's about who can hold their nerve. And so for me in that moment, I think that didn't click in until that 220. It was kind of like it took those first few jumps to be thinking about what had happened beforehand, to then realize that, like, I actually needed, be here and be in this moment. And then from then that kind of clicked into another sort of being. But also, I'm sitting here having achieved that qualifying round. It doesn't mean that this one's going to be easy either. In Tokyo, I'm already thinking about that qualifying round and how I can get through that. So yeah, I think at the same time though, like, knowing that I hadn't done it for a few world champs previous, having missed in that qualifying round, in a way, I think it was good that it was so hard to get through that qualifying round, because I think that really I had to put some demons to bed, and I had to really go to a deep place to get through that. I think if I just cruised through it, without missing any bars, I think that I probably would have gone, oh yeah, easy, I know how to do a qualifying round now, rather than actually really kind of like having to dig in and learn from it.
How did you do it though, Hamish? Because I've heard you talk about this before, and you're talking about looking into the abyss, and your body must completely tense up as well. So suddenly that kind of fear starts to manifest itself physically too. So literally, how did you end up overcoming that then? Because I imagine so many thoughts are going through your mind. You're thinking about previous world championships, here we go again. This can't be happening to me. So, I mean, how do you literally pull that off then?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's interesting, like the first jump I did in that 220 was just a bad jump. Timing wasn't there. These things happen. I wasn't intentional enough with my start of my run up. And then that just clicks a cycle. Suddenly you're thinking, like you said, about what happened last time, and also it's kind of around like I suppose the solutions available to you. It's like, when you do a jump wrong, like what can you do to change it? Is it technical? I mean, mainly it comes for an athlete, or for a high jumper especially, it comes down to body position and rhythm and speed. And so it's around like talking to the coach around, was I in the right position? Was my curve deep enough? What did my speed look like? And then just essentially changing based on that. And then it's also around between jumps, trying to, for me, kind of reset the slate. So you obviously reflect on the jump, and then you kind of do a bit of meditation, do a bit of breath work to kind of bring back, back to base level, so that you're not kind of thinking about the last jump, and then you can kind of fully commit to the next one. So we kind of say it's like, you step back, you step up, and then you step back in. And that's kind of a pretty standardized process for me. I didn't do that between the first jump and the second jump. And so then that second jump, the reason I didn't clear it was because of terror. Like, my legs buckled mid run up. Like, I actually just couldn't take off. And so, as you said, like the fear was in my legs. Like, my muscles just were not working the way they could. And so that time between the second and third jump, was one of the longest moments of my life. It was a very, very long amount of time to actually have to sit there and kind of contend with where I was at and what was about to come up. And yeah, I suppose the way that I did that was I sat down. That was when I finally kind of remembered that I needed to do all these things. And so I tried to commit to them as deeply as possible. I went over to talk to Jimmy, and kind of, he gave me a bit of a pep talk and just said, what I actually needed to do in the jump. So that was kind of the technical piece. And then I sat down. I just tried to breathe and just really bring my heart rate back down, because I really noticed that it was going through the roof at that point. And brought my heart rate back down. Started to do a bit of breath work, a bit of mindfulness. For me, sometimes kind of imagining my happy place, and where the places and the moments in my life where I've felt really truly at peace and really happy. That's kind of where I sometimes go to in those moments. It's not all the time, because sometimes you go there and then you kind of go, oh, man, I wish I was there rather than competing right now. So it's a bit of a balance. But at that moment, I was very much thinking about being at home with my friends and my family and mum and dad, and just walking along the beach at our beach house, which is a place that I kind of grew up at during summer and spent a lot of time at. So I was kind of visualizing my beach house and mum and dad, and then once I was able to kind of step back into that moment, I just felt that little bit more at peace. I wouldn't say I was completely at peace at that point, but I just felt like I suddenly kind of realized the context of the qualifying and kind of how it sat within my life, and could accept the fact that, if I didn't do that jump, maybe that would have been the end of my career. But at the same time, I knew that there was all this sort of amazing other stuff in my life that still kind of meant that wouldn't have been the end of the world. So yeah, that was kind of enough to drag me out of that feeling of terror, and just sort of reminded me that at the end of the day, if I'm just trying and I'm just trying to do as well as possible, then that's kind of all I can do. So give myself the best opportunity in that last attempt, and then just see what happens. And thankfully, I was able to scrape over it.
Oh man, sport is brutal, right?
Well, and it's just the psychology is fascinating, because you sort of touched on it there, but I've always thought for an elite athlete, the thing you must want more than anything is to know that in the biggest moments and the pressure moments, you are someone who's going to step up and find that extra little bit. I mean, even for us normal people, I feel like that. There's moments in my life where I think, yeah, you know what, back was against the wall and I found something. So I wonder then, the pressure of that moment, and then you overcame it, to then getting to the final and being in that jump off. Is it a completely different type of pressure, or maybe there's no pressure at all really at that point? I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's a very different type of pressure. I think for me, once I got to that jump off, I knew I'd achieved my goal, and I'd proved to myself that I was in good shape. I jumped 236, which was an equal PB for me, and absolutely monstered it. I was kind of almost a little bit annoyed I didn't jump 238. That was sort of the overarching feeling within that jump off. But yeah, I think it is completely different, because I mean, athlete to athlete, it's always different, depending on what your mindset is. But for me, I knew that I jumped really, really high and really kind of proved myself, and I put on a show as well. The crowd was loving it. They were enjoying the jump off, and, to have that, 80,000 people in Stade de France all kind of locked into watching high jump and being able to create this kind of amazing spectacle for them and what was the jump off. I think for me, that was the real success. And so, yeah, the pressure of actually just being there and being present and being able to create that moment, regardless of the outcome, was really important for me. So I think that was probably the difference between that and the qualifying, was that I was so heavily focused on the outcome. I was focused on the ability to then do another jump, and allowing myself to continue kind of creating stories within high jump. I think that's probably the biggest thing that has kind of annoyed me the last few years when I'm not in a position to be able to kind of be there for the end of the comp, is that I'm kind of missing out on being able to add to the event and add to what is, an amazing sport in athletics. And so, yeah, I think for me, it's not really that interesting watching someone come fifth place or sixth place. It's really interesting being there and kind of enjoying the moment of sharing that with the medalists. So yeah, I just really wanted that to be something that I was being a part of. And yeah, and qualifying, you're not creating that, but it is the ability to be able to kind of create something a couple of days later, which is what you're really thinking about.
We're proud at Podium to be sponsored by Morton, which has completely revolutionized sports fueling. If you're not familiar, Morton uses hydrogel technology to deliver more carbohydrates to get the most out of performance without the stomach issues. And those 2 points are so important, especially when you're running long distance events. Personally, I've struggled with gels and drinks in the past, but Morton really is game changing. The gels do take some getting used to, a bit thicker, not like a liquid, but once you do, you'll see the benefits. It works by effectively bypassing the stomach using natural ingredients, and you can trust it. All products are Informed Sport certified. So with the road season here again, I'll be using it all throughout autumn and winter, whether that's training or races. And if you're in the same boat, it's a great time for you to find out more. Listeners to the podcast can get 15% off using the code PODIUM15, all one word, at morton.com. It's a one-off code, and the details are also in the show notes.
So for me, when I compare like that situation in qualifying and the situation in the final, it's qualifying is like you're going to lose out on something. Yeah, you're right up against facing failure versus achieving something wonderful. And like, do you think you respond very differently to kind of the threat of failure and the opportunity to succeed?
Yes, I think so. Like, I think for me, it's a big confidence thing as well. Like, I think that usually in the start of a competition, my first few jumps are about building confidence. And so I think and I think it is because you have that feeling of, if I don't jump this is going to happen, rather than nearing the end of the comp, it's more, if I jump this will happen. It's that you're responding to a positive stimulus rather than a negative one, because ultimately that is high jump, right? Is that at the start of the comp, the only real reason the bar keeps going up is to thin people out and to get to the interesting part. The first part of competition is not really the most interesting thing in the world, and so as athletes and as spectators, that's just the reality of it. So yeah, I think there is that feeling of just needing to get through the rounds, and then once you get through the rounds, then it's about bringing out the competition mindset and bringing that dog in you. It's about that really like kind of feeling of performance. So I think I respond very differently to both of those things. But once I can kind of push through that feeling of just trying to wait till everyone thins out, that's definitely when I compete the best.
Sorry, Katie, you were going to go.
I was enjoying breath in. I was so in sync.
Well, spoiler alert, you won.
Despite our best efforts to take that medal off you.
So you came through that jump off, and we've seen it quite a few times, over the last few years, which was rare, that we've even had that. I know you've talked about the fact that you felt like you were always going to go for the jump off. Do you think if you had have you ever thought about the hypothetical of if you had gone to Shelby and said, do you want to share gold? Do you think he would have taken it? Because it felt like you had momentum.
Yeah, it's funny. Like, I look back on it, and it kind like of course I would have gone for jump off. Like, looking back on it, given that Shelby had done 2 PBs, and I felt like my back had been up against the wall a number of times, and I'd responded from that challenge, and he didn't even have his first miss in the competition until the bar was 230 plus in the final. And so I think looking back on it, I can see how it looked obvious, but I wasn't even thinking about those things in that moment. Like, I wasn't even really thinking about who I was competing against. I was just thinking about what it meant to me. And it's just weird because obviously last time it got shared, and so we'd actually talked about it a lot in that kind of 3 years following, and a lot more than if you'd ever had any other competition. And so I kind of already knew like so strongly about what I wanted to do in that moment, and I'd visualized it. I'd imagined what would have happened in that space, and so I think potentially, I genuinely think that if I'd asked to share, Shelby still wouldn't have. But I also know that never would have happened, because I didn't want to share it. So yeah, I think that it's almost, it would be an interesting scenario.
Also, you talked about being really hungry, didn't you, Hamish, as well? So you just wanted to get it done so you could go.
That's the reason for a joint medal, right? Go get your free McDonald's.
Yeah, as long as they're chocolate medals, because I need some food.
But no, on the sharing medals, so you guys not sharing in Paris, to me, almost highlighted like the significance of Barshim and Tamberi, and that there was a different story there for those two, and why they were perhaps more inclined to share. And then also Katie Moon and Nina Kennedy in the women's pole vault, they were talking about it becoming unsafe. you've said you guys were exhausted, but and of course there's a risk of injury, but Katie Moon and Nina Kennedy in the pole vault were saying it's not safe right now for us to carry on going upside down 5 meters in the air.
Yeah.
So it made sense to me, you guys.
Yeah, I think probably the biggest thing that I feel very strongly about is that, like, there's no right or wrong answer here. I think that we get so caught up these days in saying, like, you have to agree with one thing and therefore you cannot agree with the other. Like, whether you agree that Tamberi and Barsham were right in sharing and we were wrong, or they were wrong and we were right. It's just not like that. Like, I was in the stadium in Tokyo. I made that final, thankfully. That qualifying round went well. But I was there and I was sharing that moment. I was sitting with Tom Gale, who's a British high jumper who also made the final, and that whole final we had just been pretty much like sitting there trying to work out who was going to win. And we could not split Barsham and Tamberi. It was, just the way that they were jumping and the way that they were competing was just a step above everyone else. And so, when it got to that moment and they shared, like, that was the coolest thing that we'd witnessed. Like, I remember being there and just loving it. And it was so funny because I spent 3 years defending their decision. Every time people asked me about it, I said, like, that was the coolest thing ever. And I still think it is. Like, 100% it is the coolest thing that I've been a part of. Well, other than maybe my one. But, it's, and then to then also go, well, like, I suppose, like, for me, like, I can accept that that was cool for them and the reasons behind what they did was very different. And then also go, but I wouldn't be a part of that. Like, I think that's kind of sport is realizing that, there's so many different kind of stories at play and reasons why people get into it. And also, like, I mean, one of the key things that, I spent a lot of time in the last 3 years. I did quite a lot of school speaking. And I always put that example up as how sport is bringing people together. You've got an Italian, a Qatari.
Do you not undermine that totally? Have you not just undermined that totally by not doing it?
Well,
do you have to change
it's just
your
a completely different theme, right? Like, it's like for them, you've got an Italian, a Qatari who, they've been brought together because of sport. And they've shared that moment and people talk about it and they put it up and I think that's really cool. And then you look at what we've done and that was about, being brave enough to try. And so for me, that was kind of my lens, I suppose. I was looking at what they're doing and I can never, I can't speak for them, but that moment that they shared was amazing. But then also knowing for me that as an athlete, I work so hard to be the best I can be. And it's almost like you spend your life building a Ferrari and then you get given an opportunity to drive that Ferrari really, really fast. And you say, nah, I'm all right. Like that's how it felt like for me. It was like, I knew that I was in such good shape and I knew that I was, I'd put myself in a position where I was ready to jump and ready to take on whatever challenge that gave me. And that was just another challenge. It was about sharing that challenge and really kind of waiting until there was one last guy standing. So yeah, it's just a different mindset. And I still to this day, as I said, think what they did was amazing. But at the same time, for me, sport is about seeing who can hold their nerve when it really, really matters. And for me, that was really important.
So no one has bought you a Ferrari since you become Olympic champion. That is brutal.
Yeah, still waiting for that one. If you've got any listeners who have got one spare,
yeah, we'll pop in a good word. But sort of like picking up on a few strands there. So we talked about you getting really hungry towards the end of the Olympic final. And Hannah's talking there about a really good example there with the pole vault and that shared gold where they were saying, at this point after 3 hours often, isn't it? And it's getting unsafe. In terms of energy burn then and fatigue and things like that during competition, I feel like high jump is such a good sport to look at how the different athletes manage it because you have such characters in there, don't you?
Yeah, for sure. And I think people forget, like, obviously jumping high is the ultimate goal, right? Like that's kind of what it is. But there's all these other things that you have to manage to get there. And so I think for me, fatigue and hunger and how you manage your nutrition strategy is 100% part of that problem that you're trying to achieve. And so I think that I can't speak on safety concerns in pole vault. I think that is a completely different conversation to what we're having. But
Probably.
but I think, yeah, I think that for us, like, there's never any risk necessarily, unless it's really, heavily raining or there's, track issues. I don't think there's a massive safety risk. It's just around like how you control yourself through that time. You look at the options when you start the competition and you go, how many people are in the comp? How long is it expected to be? If I jump really well, is it going to be longer? If I don't, is it going to be, it will be shorter. But I think that that's something that for me, I see it as a real strength in my program is that we do think about those things. And so, yeah, I think that you kind of look at what happened in the jump off and you say, well, yes, I was very hungry. In that last jump, I was genuinely just thinking about wanting food, and if I did this jump and got out of there, I could actually eat. And so that was quite a weird thing to think about. But
it's the irony though that you probably still didn't eat for hours, did you? Because you have to do all your media and your lap of honor and drug testing.
I should have come second. I probably would have been out of there quicker, but no, I wouldn't have been. But yeah, I know it is the irony. Like I think by the time I actually really got a good feed in after the final, it was probably like 5 a.m. and it was like a real average burger in the middle of Paris, and it's just made my tummy feel even worse. But these are just the things that you have to think about as athletes, and I think that saying that high jump is just about jumping the highest is a very, very simplistic way of looking at it.
Do you have, just quickly on that point, do you have like an optimum number of jumps you think you can do in a competition? Like, do you max out on 6 or 7, or where's your sweet spot?
Yeah, it depends on what time of year it is. I think that in the start of the year when I'm kind of a little bit heavier trained, so I'm just on a heavy training load, and just the way that I'm jumping is not fully connected with my real optimum kind of technical state. It's not that many. It's probably, like you said, it's probably 5 to 7 jumps. But when I'm in that kind of competition mindset and really peaking for a comp, I know that I'm expected to jump up to 15 times. And so that's kind of what we prepare for. At the Olympics, I did 12 jumps. Actually, no, 15 jumps. So, a lot of jumps compared to what would normally be a comp of about 7. But that's just the realities of it. Like you look at how a competition is structured, a major competition, and it's just what you have to prepare for. So, yeah.
Can I go back to what Katie was saying about the different characters that you have within your event? Because they're honestly, it's completely at different ends of the spectrum, aren't they? You've got someone like Wu, who is like this ball of energy, right? And it must be quite hard sometimes not to get caught up in it because he's getting everyone going. And I guess everyone's getting G'd up. And you've got someone like Yaroslava Mahuchik, who basically goes to sleep between gets her sleeping bag on and it looks like she's going to have a nap. So how long did it take you to find what your sweet spot in that energy sort of maintenance
barometer?
I was struggling to find the right word there.
The spectrum of high jumpers. It's
that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah, well, no, I don't know. I think it's pretty similar, but no, it's crazy. It's something I really love about our event is that you have so many different ways of achieving the problem of jumping high, right? And you have so many different people who will use different strategies. You've got the Tamberis and the Woos who are genuinely there to just suck as much energy out of the crowd as possible. And then you've got, like you said, you've got the Mahuchiks, you've got probably me a little bit sometimes, and kind of guys like Barsham who, are trying to be very chill, and kind of really, really like conserve as much energy as possible and wait for the big moments. But I think that's just the awesome thing about watching high jump and supporting it and also being a part of it is it's just crazy. Like it's just constantly moving and evolving, and depending on who's jumping and who's doing well and who's doing badly, like it's just a big circus really. And so I suppose, for me, like I love it because I feel like I compete, relatively, unemotively, it feels sometimes. I'll clear the bar, I'll walk off, I'll be pretty happy with myself, but I won't celebrate a huge amount. But I do actually love riding that wave of energy as well. I love kind of interacting with all the different guys who are competing and interacting with the crowd as well. And I feel like for me, it's around kind of picking who has good energy and who's potentially struggling a wee bit and trying to write off them a bit. So yeah, that's always kind of fun when an athlete starts off really, really, high energy and then for whatever reason doesn't do well. And then you kind of have to like, oh, okay, we're going to stop talking to you because, you bring the whole thing down and it's just a constant circus and us being all out there for so long means that we kind of all get to know each other really, really well.
Do you like move your bag, so pick it up and just be like, "It's bad vibes over there," and sit the other end?
Yeah, sometimes you have to do a wee bit of that, but it's just the way it works, right?
So you mentioned 2 meters 40 a little bit earlier, Hamish, and that's like an aim for you, obviously. No one's jumped it since 2014.
Yes.
So why?
Yeah, good question. I think for me, like I've got the CV now in terms of the titles and the almost the CV in terms of the titles and all the rest of it. But I think that like 240 is a real key performance metric within our sport, and I really feel like to be one of the high jump greats, that is kind of one of the barriers to entry. So I think just for my kind of career and my path and what I want to achieve, it makes sense. And it also kind of ties back to why I originally came into sport. I mean, growing up in New Zealand, we don't have a lot of high jump competitions, and there weren't a lot of athletes. I won senior nationals when I was 18. So by the time you're a teenager, you've beaten everybody. And so for me, it was all about how high could I go. And that was always, growing up, what was most important was it was not about winning. It was about how high you could jump. So knowing that, there are a number of guys who jump 240 in history, and I'm not one of them, it doesn't really sit that well with me. So that's definitely the next thing. But at the same time, I think there's a number of guys out there who I would hope, and kind of expect, to be honest, that will get close to 240 in the next few years. So I don't think I'll be the only one.
Hamish, there's over the years, over the last 10 years, especially in running, obviously we've seen times come down because of shoe tech and everything like that. But really interesting piece with the BBC recently on the anniversary of Jonathan Edwards' triple jump world record. There was a discussion about how shoe tech hasn't really helped much when it comes to the jumps. Do you see it that way? Have you noticed much of a sort of difference over the years? Is you're sponsored, you're a Puma athlete, so that's one of the shoes as well for the jumpers, right? Yeah. Do you notice much of a difference?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one. Like I think that I think for us as high jumpers especially, rhythm is such an important thing, and our timing is so important that if we put it on a different shoe, that actually changes our rhythm. And so, we're all too stubborn to change shoes. Like, we're still, we're using, I love my shoes. Like, don't get me wrong. It's I've got the best shoe for me, but it takes a long time to change shoes. You don't really see a lot of high jumpers ever change shoes in their career. If you look at all the guys out there competing currently, they are, they've all been in the same shoes for 3, 4, 5 years now. And so I think for us, there's just different subtleties around what actually you need out of your event, which means that kind of shoe technology hasn't really gotten into what we do. One of also the big, obvious issues is the amount of force that we produce and how quickly that's produced. When I'm putting my foot down, it's on the ground for 0.17 seconds. And so, that amount of time and that amount of like energy that's going through the floor and through the shoe into the floor is massive. It's like, it's like 8 times your body weight or something. I think we've measured it out with a force plate and it's like 700-800 kgs of force in 0.17 seconds going through the floor. And so if you change shoes, that interaction with the ground is completely changed. And so we just don't see the same benefits from this increased technology, which is, it's a shame, because, in a day and age where records and national records and world records and all the rest of it are kind of very front and center in our sport. We have been left behind a wee bit in that respect, but I think, at the same time, there's some pretty cool things that we can lean into within our event that make it still super interesting. And I think that in the future, potentially those world records will fall. But at the same time, it's just a slightly different scenario than just purely having better shoes.
That force you're talking about, like, I'm not sure a carbon plate would handle that. Like,
No.
they're not designed for that, are they? They're
No,
not
I
designed
mean,
for that
and
sort
we
of
have
force.
we've had a few iterations of shoes that have had carbon in them, but ultimately getting something that doesn't break within a couple of jumps is very hard.
How much
Wow.
do you work with Puma, Hamish, in terms of that shoe innovation? Then do you have discussions about and maybe try out some prototypes? Because it just feel like the one place where we're not seeing the benefits yet.
Yeah, we're doing a little bit of work. I mean, I wouldn't say that there's a huge amount of work to be done. Like I'm very happy with my shoe. I think that where we put our energy is not in the shoe technology, it's in the training and getting better. But at the same time, yeah, like they have been talking about a prototype and the last few years we have seen a few different options, but it's just so hard because to get the consensus of everybody who wears that shoe is almost impossible. I mean, you look at all the Puma athletes who are currently jumping, and we're kind of all in different versions of the spike anyway. So yeah, it's just very hard for them to kind of look at that space and make it kind of commercially viable, I suppose, because you've just got so many different options.
That makes sense. And you talked a lot about this, clearly a lot of science that you put into your training and people in your team. But your coach, James Sandilands, like, am I right that you guys were friends first before he was your coach? Like, I think I read that a few years ago.
Yeah, we're still friends, thankfully.
So this is a hard dynamic, getting putting that pressure on a friendship.
Yeah, it definitely has been interesting. He's 3 days older than me, so I can still say that he is the senior figure within the relationship. But yeah, we actually used to compete together when we were at high school. We didn't grow up in the same city or anything, and he was always the man that everyone looked up to and tried to beat. He went to World Youths and did all that kind of stuff, and we were all sort of struggling athletes at that point, but that he was the one who was really going to make it. And he was a hurdler, and unfortunately, he didn't really quite grow as much as he needed to sort of fully maximize his talent. But yeah, we became really good friends about 8 years ago now. And for the first 3 years that I lived in Christchurch, which is where I live and train now, when I moved there, I actually lived with him. And so that was super cool. I was kind of a struggling, junior to senior athlete, and he was still at uni, kind of doing sports science and all these other things. And so, yeah, we got together as really good friends, but then
Oh no.
he really pushed into that space as well. So it's really awesome to have him with me. It's really cool as well because given I spend so much time overseas, to actually have someone who I'm mates with, and we can enjoy that time together, on rest days and really kind of explore the world together is a really, really cool place to be. So yeah, there's definitely a little bit of balancing the relationships, like whether, I'm sending him memes on Instagram or he's sending me emails, talking about training. It's sort of a very kind of segmented relationship, but we definitely make it work.
Do you have to like wear different hats then, or like wear different? You've only got 3 t-shirts for 3 months anyway, but kind
Yeah.
of really,
Yeah, 3 t-shirts and
really
6
try and
hats.
say, oh, we're mates now. We're not talking.
Yeah,
about it.
we're pretty good at doing it innately, but also the other complication is that my girlfriend is a heptathlete and she trains in our squad as well, and so it's like we're also balancing like him as my friend and then him as my coach and then him as my girlfriend's coach. And so it's like it's yeah, it can get quite complicated, but it definitely works out.
Just finally, before we let you go, Hamish, I was really struck by something you said after winning gold last year, where you talked about almost the mentality of thinking that to become an Olympic champion, you'd probably have to become someone different to who you are or were. And then you realise that actually you were good enough as you were, who you are, to become Olympic champion. So do you think you've changed, or has life changed since Paris last summer?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely has changed. I think when I go home, I'm recognized a lot more. A lot more people want time out of me, which is really cool. And also I feel like my opportunity to inspire the next generation of athletes has elevated hugely. And so that's really exciting for me, and really ties into my values of why I do sport, and why I want to be here. But yeah, it's an interesting concept. Like I think growing up, given that we didn't really have any role models within high jump in New Zealand, I always thought that I wasn't who I needed to be. It was like, oh, I'm Hamish. I'm 85 kgs. I can run this fast. I can jump this high. But like, I'll probably be very different if I actually was to make it, because all these other guys, they are different. They're just different athletes. And I think it took me pretty much until winning that gold to realize that that person was kind of always there. It was always within me, and it was just about maximizing his qualities rather than trying to change his qualities to suit other people's jumping, and other people's ways of achieving the problem of jumping high. So yeah, it's definitely made me feel a lot more at peace with who I am, and worrying about what people think. But yeah, it's a pretty crazy scenario that kind of I had to get to what is one of the greatest kind of pinnacles within our sport to reach that realization. And I just hope that, it doesn't take other people quite that long, because unfortunately not everyone can get to that top point. So yeah, I think it's pretty crazy. Like, even now when I talk to athletes, like, it's just, the kind of the language and the attitude I hear is so much around, trying to change things. And I think it's pretty important for athletes to really look within themselves, and realize that everyone has these really, really kind of really highly developed qualities, which make them amazing athletes. And if they can kind of really maximize those things, and be confident in what they are, then I think that, that's just going to make the world a much better place.